Okay, peeps. Good morning. Welcome back. So today we're going to be going over the grayscale trusts and how they seem to finally get some love as a result of Jay Powell's speech at Jackson Hole. So with that being said, let's get it. All right. So the first thing I want to show you guys here is actually Bitcoin, because as you guys know, Bitcoin is the market mover. So you see this little green candle right here. This one, this big long one right above the EMAs. That was Jackson Hole. That was yesterday. So we did also get a golden cross on Bitcoin, which, as you guys know, Bitcoin has been very choppy, but we did just recently hit oversold because of that kind of freakish, what do you want to call it, black swan flash crash thing that we had. So the thing I want to point out here that I'm looking for is a couple of things on Bitcoin, and I know this video is not about Bitcoin, but the reason why I go over this with you guys during the Grayscale Trust videos is because the main grayscale trusts that you guys look at, the most popular ones, it seems, is LTCN and BCHG. These move with Bitcoin because they're Bitcoin oscillators. And also Bitcoin in general is the market mover. When Bitcoin goes up, everything goes up in crypto. When Bitcoin goes down, everything goes down in crypto. One of the things I'm looking for here is a bullish breakout of the RSI on the weekly time frame. As you guys can see, that pretty much marked the bottom here back in 2021. It kind of more or less marked the bottom here in well, it wasn't exactly perfect, but it more or less did mark the bottom here back in September, October of last year. And then, of course, we're looking for something similar here, September, October, November, somewhere in that time frame this year. So we're still within the bull flag. That's still very bullish. Basically, this is you could look at this as a few different patterns. It could be a bull flag. It could be a descending channel, which is also a bullish pattern. And it's also a pullback in time in general. So more or less consolidation / accumulation. So no matter how you want to look at this, it is, in my opinion, considered to be bullish. Okay, a bull flag is a bullish pattern. A descending channel is a bullish pattern, and accumulation is also a bullish signal. There's a small possibility it could go bearish out of the flag. Okay, for every trade, there's a counter trade. Okay, just understand that. So if the high probability scenario here is this is a bull flag / descending channel and it's going to break to the upside, then there's a small, I would say tiny probability that maybe it doesn't and it breaks to the downside. But my money, if I had to bet my money on something, I would bet my money that this is going to be a bullish breakout again. Over the next 2, 3, 4 months, we should theoretically, based on cycle theory, see Bitcoin start to smash to new all-time highs, and the Fed's getting ready to cut rates and all that jazz. So now let's get into the content on the grayscale trusts. So I'm actually going to pop down here to the daily time frame first. I kind of want to go over the RSI with you guys so you can see that the RSI was oversold here. This is usually a pretty strong indication of some kind of local bottom. It doesn't time it perfectly. As you can see, this wasn't the true bottom here. It did go lower. But generally speaking, every time we get one of these, it usually does indicate pretty close to a bottom. So you can see this was pretty close to a bottom back here. This was the bear market lows down here in December of 2022, and ever since then it went up. So I just wanted to show you guys that to show you that, in my opinion, I think we are pretty close to the bottom. If not, we may have already hit the bottom on these trusts based on the RSI here. And you can see that the only other time, well, there was an oversold signal here, but this wasn't the true bottom. So we still went lower after this. But the only other time we got oversold on BCHG was down here during the bear market lows. And what happened afterwards, it went from less than $1 all the way up to $24. Same thing on HZEN, ETCG, ETH, not quite on PhilG. We did get the signal on GBAT. I wouldn't really call that oversold. It's pretty close to oversold, but it's not really oversold like this was back here. And you can see this was actually pretty much the low. I mean, we had a double bottom here, but as of right now, it is still the low. G-Link, that was definitely a low. Was not thinking it was going to go down that far. Solana, I mean, yeah, this thing hasn't really gotten oversold because, again, I think the markets are waiting on the potential of a spot Solana ETF. GXLM has actually held up quite well. This hasn't had a oversold signal in a while. Mana did have an oversold signal, and Zcash as well. So you can kind of see that the all the grayscale trusts, the crypto markets in general, are kind of moving in sync with each other. All right, so LTCN, we're still looking at this macro trend line here. This is the lower trend line. We have two of them. Okay, so it broke this one up here on the flash crash, but we have still maintained this one down here. What this should tell you, the fact that it bounced off of this, is that we're probably not the only ones looking at this trend line. There's probably plenty of other traders out there also looking at this trend line. Because if we were the only ones looking at this, there's a good chance it probably would have just cut straight through the trend line down to the downside, and it did not. So levels that we're looking for, heavily traded levels that other people are also looking at, because again, it all comes back to, a trader and investor psychology. If I'm looking for potentially a bounce move here on like a swing trade or something like that, what am I going to look for? I'm going to look for an area, or an investor position. I'm going to look for an area that I know is likely to get bought up. Okay. So if I actually get rid of this and I come back here and I say, well, where's a potential trend line I could draw? You can see I just draw this out, and well, there it is right there. So anyways, this trend line, basically, it's, in my opinion, it could potentially range. It doesn't necessarily have to stay on this trend line for this long, but I just want to throw it out there that the trend line and the resistance do eventually converge. So I'm looking at anywhere from 13 all the way up to, or sorry, not 13, 10.50 all the way up to roughly about $13 as a potential buy area. So the top of this resistance here is at 15. You got 25 to 27 and 54 all the way up to the swing high. So measured moves here are going to be, looks like roughly about 32% to get to the top of this range, 140% and then 380% respectively. And just so y'all know, I think that obviously this is not a guarantee. Okay, this is just my estimation. But I think that crypto is going to start really moving up once the Fed begins cutting rates. Okay, they moved up based on the Fed saying they were going to cut rates, but I think once the rate cuts actually start happening at the beginning of next month, I think that's when crypto is going to start moving more seriously to the upside. Okay, and we're going to start to see the beginning of the next phase of the parabolic piece of the bull run. So BCHG, kind of same thing as LTCN, potentially looking for right along this trend line. So roughly about $5.50 all the way up to $7 here, kind of trending into the end of the year, which goes into this previous resistance. And then we have 765, about 10 and a quarter, 1270. You have a couple more levels up here, 18 to around 20 and then $24 respectively. So assuming that it, let's just say it does get back to the trend line. Obviously, it's not at the perfect entry point, but some people DCA, some people just look to position themselves at certain levels. So 40%, 127%, and then 259%, and roughly about 329, 330% respectively. HZEN, we're still within this falling wedge. Again, this is a bullish pattern. So if it breaks out to the upside, which I assume it will, the target is the top of the wedge, so that's 1050. Support currently sits at 250 to roughly about 290, and then you have resistance up here at 385 to 420, 680 to, it's hard to get this exact, to roughly about 810. Let's see here. I'd say probably about 11 and a quarter to about 12 and a quarter up there at that resistance above head. So it's sitting on support. You guys can do what you want to with that. So you'd be looking at 184% all the way up to potentially 330%, and to get to the top of the target for the wedge pattern is roughly about 266%. ETCG, we're holding the support, so support here $8.70 to about $10. I'd be looking for a target up here at 16. The top of this channel, which is the bottom of the resistance, oddly enough, is 1330 and then 1750 all the way up to $20 up there at resistance. So the percentage gains here is roughly about 51% and 90% respectively. ETH, so there is a gap here. Not sure if you guys really noticed that or not, but generally speaking, gaps do get filled. So I am expecting this to go back up at some point. My entry target would have been right around 1880. You guys are free, of course, to get in wherever you want. Support below that is roughly about 1060 to 1550. Resistance is 2350 all the way up to about 28.25. And then the cup and handle target is all the way up here at 46, which matches almost exactly the previous peak high for this particular trust. So if you got in at the white line, or you get a second chance to get in at the white line, it's roughly about 54% and 147% respectively. If it goes down into this support, which I really highly doubt it's going to do, I'm not saying it's not possible. It's always possible, but I just don't see that as a very high likely outcome. 141% to roughly about 290%. So Phil G, it has moved back into this resistance here, but it hasn't had a confirmed close above yet, so I can't exactly say that it's support yet. We need to see that first. So as of right now, support is 480 to about 1240. If you want to get in at this level of support, that's up to you. Some people will do that because they expect that, the candle's inside the zone, so it must be about ready to break out. And then, they assume it's going to break out and get a retest. People that do that are trying to predict the market move. They're not waiting for the confirmation. And we do that sometimes, but in situations like with crypto, unless we typically just DCA, but if we're trying to position trade, we're not going to position ourselves long into a resistance. So anyways, the resistance zone here is roughly about 35 to 41. We say it's pretty much basically about 37 to 40 is kind of a better area. It gives roughly about the middle of the zone. So $400 at the all-time high up there. So from the bottom to the all-time high, you'd be looking at 4,400%. GBET. So this thing is, we had a double bottom back here, so that's extremely bullish. Now it's just a question of how it's going to play out. So support is 440 to 510, resistance 780 to roughly about 990 up there, and then the all-time high is at 32. So the measured moves here would be roughly about 96% and 554% respectively. GLIV, this thing is just kind of sitting there at the lows, not really doing much, but you can see these wicks to the downside, so that tells me that there are buyers looking at this same zone that we're looking at here that are buying the zone, or basically buying as close to that zone as they can get it. So support $11.50 to $15. The all-time high up here is at roughly about 80. And then the support below that, which is the bear market lows, I don't think it goes this low, but it's to about 370. It's possible that it goes that low, but unless we go into an actual real recession, I just don't see that happening. So 497 would be the percentage gains. G-Link, nice little bounce here off of support. Again, we kind of have a double bottom, 1, 2 retests, and then boom, theoretically this should pop off. So 39 to roughly about 45 on support there, 65 to I'll say 65 to 85, we'll just call it that, at resistance, and then 220 at the all-time highs. So from the support, you'd be looking at roughly about 88% and 391% respectively. If you did get in at this candle this week, the percentage gain then becomes 50% and roughly about 297%. Solana is slowly retesting and riding this kind of downtrend line. So again, this trend line ranges between 380 to 255 going into the end of the year. I can't really tell you guys exactly where I think the actual bottom is going to be on this thing before it eventually goes higher. I will tell you that there is kind of this nice, what looks to be a nicely formed support base here. So maybe you'd be looking at this range. The range is roughly 295 to 350. Personally, I would not buy this unless it got down at least down here. So this would be 170 to 205. There is a lower support here, but I don't think it goes that low. That's 70 to about $80. And the all-time high up here is at roughly about 580. So just, whoops, I actually measured that as a bearish candle. Sorry about that, y'all. So just to measure from the current price to the all-time highs is only a 38% move. So you guys can see why I would be willing to wait for it to come lower or just buy any of these other trusts that are much cheaper in my opinion. So let's say we do kind of just trudge along this trend line here and eventually get into the support zone by the end of the year. That's possible. Although once again, in my opinion, I don't think that's likely. It would then become an 82% move. And if for some crazy reason we manage to get back down here, it then becomes as much as a potential 220% move, and that's just to get back to all-time highs. So GXLM, I did think this white line was going to hold, but unfortunately it has not. So there is another area that looks like it's also heavily traded just right below this. And you know, for some of the trusts that have like multiple levels on it, like you have this trend line as a level, this line as a level of support, this line as a level of support, and then you have the support zone down here. If I was seeing something like this where there's multiple buy points, I would just slowly, if it was me, I would either DCA down or I would put in smaller chunks of money in at each support zone. I would not be looking to buy all in at any of these higher support zones because I can see on the chart that you have 1, 2, 3, 4 potential buy zones here. I would just look to be slowly chunking into these or DCA, and I would not be saying, like, if I had $2,000 to put in, I would not put $2,000 up here because there's a chance it could always drop lower and lower and lower. The idea here is that I would want to make my money last long enough to get as close to that bottom as possible. So anyways, the current support zone looks like it is roughly around 20, but if it gets below that, you're looking at roughly about 450 to 1180. So resistance here, 53-ish to roughly about 5850. The swing high up there is at 70. So the measure moves here would be roughly about 180 to 240%. And then, so from support, you'd be looking at roughly about 675% all the way up to roughly about 806%. Mana, so this thing has actually held and closed above this white line. So this white line would be the current support. That's roughly about 1050. Below that, the next support is 150 to 340. I'm not going to say 100% that I don't think it goes back down there, but I would say the probability is very low that we see the bear market lows again before the end of the bull run. I mean, that's never happened as far as I know. So 1750 to 20 and a quarter at that resistance, and then 70 all the way up there at the highs. Excuse me. So roughly about 70% gain here, and then 518% respectively. So Zcash, this thing really likes the support zone. I'm not sure why, but it is really just kind of clenching to that support zone there. It does not want to move. So yeah, this is the support zone as of right now. So you have 430 to 510. It did get a double bottom bounce off of this white line here, so roughly about 320, and below that support would be about $1.60 to 285. Your resistance is going to be 8 to 970, and then you have 10 and a quarter all the way up there at the swing highs. So from the first support zone, you'd be looking at 100% to 114%. Second support zone, you would be looking at roughly about 200% to 221%. And the third support zone, we'll just go with the bottom of this channel at this white line, because that's where a lot of the price action is being traded down there, or I should say was being traded down there, roughly about 373% to 408%. So anyways, hope you all enjoyed this content. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see y'all later. Peace.